Hello, and welcome to a new season of Interpreting India. Geopolitical realignments, sustainable growth, healthcare financing, inclusive digital transformations, climate change, supply chain disruptions, urbanization, and several other critical global matters envelop the world today as India holds the G20 presidency. We at Carnegie India continue to bring voices from India and around the world to examine the role of technology, the economy, and international security in shaping India's future. Today, we'll be talking about the India Germany relationship. The relationship between India and Germany does not receive as much attention as it deserves in the Indian and German strategic circles. In recent years, however, the bilateral partnership has received a big impetus, both economically and geopolitically. India and Germany have had a strategic partnership since 2001, but have recently also embarked on what is called the Green Strategic Partnership, a partnership for green and sustainable development. What is that about? Where does the India Germany relationship stand currently? What are the challenges in taking this relationship to the next level? What are the economic, military, and geopolitical drivers of this relationship? What can India learn from how Germany has become an economic and industrial superpower? What can Germany learn from India's own dynamic startup ecosystem? And finally, how can the two countries cooperate on major global challenges such as climate? Joining us today to discuss all these questions is Ambassador Ackermann. Ambassador Ackermann is the current ambassador of Germany to India. He has studied, interestingly, art history and economics and received his doctorate in art history in 1993, the same year that he joined the German Foreign Service. Before becoming ambassador to India less than a year ago, he was Director General for Africa, Latin America, Near and Middle East at the Federal Foreign Office for 5 years. So, welcome, Ambassador Ackermann. It's a pleasure to have you on this episode of Interpreting India, Carnegie India's podcast. And I'm looking forward to our conversation. We've had some great conversations, obviously, earlier as well. And today I'm hoping to talk to you about, obviously, your time here in India. I'm hoping to talk to you more about the Germany-India relationship, where we see that going, and anything else that we'd like to talk about, to be honest. So welcome again, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Anuri. It is a great pleasure to be with you and Carnegie. It's a fantastic opportunity. I'm not a very experienced podcast person, but I think I'll be managing fine with you. So
I think, as we were discussing, if you've done well on talk shows like The Daily Show, I think this one will be an easy one. That's right. So, Master Ackermann, actually would love to maybe start off talking about your time here. It's been, I think this is your first year in this posting at least. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your impressions, some highlights from your time here?
So it's not a secret that I am enjoying myself tremendously here in India. As you might know, it's my second posting in India. I have been here as a political counselor between 2007 and 2010, and I came back 7 months ago. So I'm early in my tenure, so to speak. But 7 months by diplomatic standards is already quite a time. So I can't say that I'm a complete newcomer. I have had a very, very interesting time so far with high-ranking visitors and interesting moments politically. But when you ask me about highlights, I would say so three things come to my mind. First is nature, and I did fantastic. The 2 days in Periyar in Kerala in this reserve. It's a tiger reserve where nobody ever sees a tiger, but you see all. No, I didn't see one, but you see all sorts of other wildlife. And I must say that was just a fantastic experience, full of elephants and birds and wild dogs and gulls, and it was fantastic. And this biodiversity aspect is very important to me, and I think India has a lot to offer. You have to leave once in a while cities to see, what is going on in the countryside, and the reserves India has are just fantastic and amazing. So that was a clear highlight. Another highlight is I had two books, I would say. I read with the greatest fascination Gitanjali Shree's masterpiece, Tomb of Sand, which I find really a fantastic book. Indian authors are, world-class narrators, and she has put up a story that is but the English translation is very well done, as she herself says, and I must say that was a fantastic book. And the other book I really enjoyed was also dealing with partition. It's Anjan Malhotra's Remnants of a Separation. I find really a masterpiece in oral history. It's something that really touched me deeply, because as she says, everybody has separation somehow, or partition. We in Germany, we have, after the war, all the refugees came into Germany, and they fled. They had to flee their homelands, and they had to resettle. And it's a very similar story, and that resonated with me when I read Angel's book. And the third thing, you might be surprised, but a highlight was my meeting with President Murmu. Now, when a diplomat interacts with the president of India, it's always very formal. It's not very personal. I think that's the role of the president, is always very formal. But I must say that, the fact that a person of this community is the president of India, that she sits in Ashoka Hall with her dignity and her warmth and her friendliness, I find that just fascinating, I must say. I find it, in my previous posting, I visited Odisha and also Chhattisgarh, and, you see the tribal communities and you see their difficult lives. And when you have somebody of their group sitting or being the head of state of the Republic of India,
yeah. I think it's one thing that I think all of us in India are very, deservedly proud of. I think
you should.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think that from the highlights you've mentioned, I think I have to say the first one resonates with me as much as probably the second one, because I've also written a book. But the first one, my family, my wife and I and our kids, we love to spend as much time actually out of the cities. And not just because of the pollution, but I think just that connecting with nature. And I think you told me that you've also grown up, I think, more in nature than in the city environment. And I think that, especially during the COVID time, the kind of time that our kids were able to spend in nature has helped them more than anything else that they would have done in the cities. And India has so much to offer on that front, as you rightly said. From Kerala, obviously, to the mountains. I don't know if you spent time much in the...
I did it last time. But next week I'm going to Assam to spend a couple of days in Kaziranga also to see rhinos and other wildlife. So I'm looking forward to that too. So I think there, as you rightly say, India has so much to offer.
So coming from wildlife to maybe probably equally wild, but maybe not in perception, but in reality, foreign policy, geopolitics, and obviously bilateral relations. We would love to talk about the India-Germany relationship. I think compared to maybe the US-India relationship or some other relationships that India has, I think we don't talk enough about the Germany-India relationship. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation. And so I want to talk to you about the India-Germany relationship. Obviously, just in your first 7 months, you've had the Chancellor visit just recently. And coming off from that visit, obviously, but even otherwise, the economic relationship between India and Germany, I wanted to first talk about. My own belief is that if the economic relationship becomes strong, then the relationship becomes deep and long. And so I wanted to get your sense. I know there was a big business delegation this time around that came along with the Chancellor, but maybe you can give us a slightly broader view of where you see the potential and the challenges on the India-Germany economic relationship.
So I think I fully agree with what you say. A strong economic partnership is a good basis for all other partnerships. It is not enough. It is one aspect, but it is a very good start, let's say. We have about 2,000 plus German companies investing in India and manufacturing, working, offering services from. And very important in this context, not only the big, companies, but also very small ones who, for various reasons, come to India and see a opportunity for them here in India. So our trade balance with India is 30 billion every year, and it's an balanced balance. It's 15-15, which is very unusual for German. It's unusual. And that's good. It's very healthy. It shows how healthy the relations are in economic relations. But we have to say that 30 billion in comparison to the 250 billions we do with China is not enough. And I think that's what the government sees. our government sees, there is a clear encouragement from the government when it comes to the German business community to diversify. That's, I think, to put it very bluntly, is don't put all your eggs in one basket called China. Okay. You have to look to other shores as well. And India comes to mind. I think it should come even more to mind than it does, because there's also Indonesia, there's Vietnam, there's Malaysia, there's Singapore. People look all across Asia. But India, and this is what we feel, is that German companies are looking to India and the opportunities in India more than they did before. So I think in the years to come, we'll have more and more German companies coming to India and making business in India. I think the overall feeling about doing businesses in India is satisfactory. Many people earn good money in India after having spent here a while. This is an investment that will not be ready to see the benefits very early. You have to wait for a couple of years. You have to establish yourself. You have to find your way through the often not so uncomplicated Indian system. Let's put it that way. But at the end, I think everybody can make good money here. Still, there are a couple of impediments, and I think we are working very closely with the Indian government. I feel that the Indian government is very responsive to our demands or requirements. Mr. Goyal and his team are very, very open-minded when it comes to problems. Not all problems can be solved, are solved, but generally speaking, I think the spirit is very good. Now, let me say one thing that would be a complete game changer for German business in India would be the EU-India FTA. The free trade agreement would change basically, big time, the chances and the benefits for the German business in India. So Germany, the government, but also German business is hugely interested in progressing this.
Yeah, let me pick up on one of the things you mentioned early on, which is the small business piece, right? So in most economic relationships between countries, the focus often remains on large corporations, large FDI numbers, conglomerates coming in, setting up massive plants or massive R&D centers. But one of the specialities or one of the things about Germany, and as we discussed last time on other occasions as well, is this concept of the Mittelstand. And so I want to talk to you a little bit more about it. If you look at India also, while we have some large corporates, obviously, many large corporates now in the Indian context, but really the core of the Indian economy is still the SME, the small and medium enterprise. And that's where I see a lot of learning for the Indian SME to be from the concept of these hidden champions of Germany. So maybe you can tell us where you see maybe one cooperation on that, and also talk about that concept, because I don't think enough people in India are familiar about that piece of the German story.
What we say is that the Mittelstand, which is basically the small and medium-sized enterprises in Germany, are the backbone of our economy. They are highly specialized, extremely well advanced and progressive little boutique shops, I would say, with products that are basically unique. They have very often in mechanical engineering, also they have the percentage of the world market in their products that is amazing. And this is one of the clear strengths of the German economy. Now, why are these people who basically have shops with 300 people at home? This is not big. It's very, very small. But why are they coming to India? And I give you two examples. One is my favorite one, because it's a company of the region where I'm from, this very rural area you mentioned earlier. So this is a company that does rotational tables, which is a product I was not aware that it existed. It's a product that is very much needed for highly sophisticated manufacturing, like, for example, for watches. Rolex uses these tables. So they have to be very, very accurate, and they move. I mean, it's only 3 companies in the world produce these tables. One of them is this very, very small company from Korea. So they come here and set up shop in Pune. Why is that? Because they say we are so sophisticated in our mechanical engineering and manufacturing that we need to find the bridge into the digital world. Yeah. So what he says, we need digitization in our manufacturing. And that's India is the place where they think that can happen. So what they did was not only set up their own shop in Pune with a couple of hundred people producing rotational tables, but also they bought a startup, some gamers. They said, these guys, we buy them. They are good. They are very smart, and in the midterm, they should be the ones who develop the digitization aspect of our manufacturing. And that's very, and I think this is what I like about this example is that India is here not some extended assembly line of European business. No, it is more than that. It gives new meaning to this industry, and therefore I think this marriage of manufacturing in the classical way and digitization can happen. So this is one example. The other example I give you is Heraeus. It's a very, very big Mittelstand company. So it's not a small shop, it's a big shop. They have been investing in India for a long, long time in a company that does the works with precious metals. And they have this is a chemical, very, very interesting company processing precious metals. And they have been working there for a long time, and they have been making good business. And they now think that, look what India can offer. And they started buying, and they bought a company in Nashik, where some guys from IIT Mumbai, I think, developed out of plastic garbage a thread. And this thread is a high value thread, a very, very sophisticated, good thread. And all the big sports companies buy this thread. So it's from garbage, it's from plastic garbage. And this company does not fit in their portfolio at all. They are working with sensors and precious metals, but they like this idea so much that they bought this company. Now it's quite successful. So in their India portfolio, they developed an own way of looking at Indian business. I like that, because it shows that there is so much to find and so much to discover here that they say it has nothing to do with our German or European market, not with our international market, but we do it here in India because we feel there is so much ingenuity, so much creativity, and we have been rewarded with such a good, business opportunity that we should look into this market.
Yeah, no, those are both excellent examples of where I think, as you rightly said, both countries and the businesses in both countries, even at the small and medium level, can actually find ways to cooperate, work together, and create value, right? And especially I think the second example that you mentioned is a great segue into the other piece of the relationship I want to talk about, which I see as becoming more and more important over the coming years, which is the energy piece. I think the cooperation around energy between India and Germany obviously possibly offers a template for India also with other countries. But let's talk about the green strategic partnership between India and Germany. There's obviously big money that has been allocated to it. But let's first talk about the vision behind it and what we see as the long-term goals and objectives of that green and strategic partnership. Because in the foreign policy world, this kind of partnership is a new one. We've heard of economic partnerships, FTAs, strategic partnerships, but we've not had as many successful green strategic partnerships. So let's hear your views on that.
Andrej, if you allow me, I would start to talk about this subject related to the old subject we are talking about, because there's two sides of our partnership with the Indians on green and sustainable development. One is a private sector part.
That's right.
I will go to talk about the non-private sector, the government part, but what I find very encouraging and extremely fascinating is that we have a lot of private companies coming to India and working in exactly this sector. So we have, for example, Ackermann, which is a very, very big windmill producer, who set up shops for windmills in Tamil Nadu with two big factories, thousands of employees. We have a company called Verbio from East Germany who just put a big biomass plant near Chandigarh, where stubble, the stubble burning in Delhi, all this, the stubble will be collected and turned into biomass and produces energy. There is a small startup from Cologne that will, with very little money, set up bio-coal processing plants, or I don't know how you say that. I mean, it's in, like big power stations, basically, for biocoal from little money, and they will be all over the country, and trying to get biocoal in the earth, on the soil, in order to improve farmers, and they can give it away for nothing because they get paid through emission certificates. So you have so many good ideas on this field, also in the private sector, that makes me believe that India is a very interesting partner for this climate and energy thing, because it's beyond government to government. It's also with civil society, it's with private sector. So now back to the government. We have this Partnership for Green and Sustainable Development, which basically collects all our efforts together with our Indian partners when it comes to energy transition, when it comes to organic development, like organic farming, smart cities, sustainable cities. We have basically three pillars of this partnership. The biggest one is energy transition. So we help regional energy providers to change their mix. I'm saying that once you want more renewables in your mix and you need financing, that's where Germany comes in. This is the biggest thing. We have credit lines, very, 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 very attractive credit lines here for KfW. And for example, in Rajasthan, there is an energy provider that relies heavily on these credits because they want to change their energy mix. There's the second leg is what we call the Smart Cities Initiative. We want cities to be more sustainable, to be more energy conscious. We want cities to be more smart when it comes to garbage, when it comes to public transport. And there are a couple of wonderful projects. One of them is the very famous the water metro in Cochin, which KfW is also financing. That's part of it. And then we have the smallest pillar, if I may say, is biodiversity and agroecology. Very important, small but very important. So there are many So we are working with the river rejuvenating, Ganga rejuvenating. We are working with in Andhra, for example. We are working with the government to promote organic farming, like they did in Sikkim. Trying to reach out to organic farming. We are working with reserves, also natural reserves, in order to protect biodiversity. So this is basically the partnership. We have every year more than €1 billion for this partnership. So it's by far the biggest development. I think after Japan, and Japan is very much, as you know, the biggest amount of money goes to this high-speed train between them. So the Germans, I think, have the biggest portfolio when it comes to energy and climate protection, and that's something which we feel very strongly about, and we want to work very closely with the Indian side. Now, I think we have excellent partners in the Indian government on that. There is a lot, as I said before, a lot of creativity, a lot of thinking, a lot of ingenuity when it comes to how to tackle climate change and how to cope with it. Sometimes we are not entirely on the same page, but that's natural. I think that's how it goes between countries. And so therefore, I think I consider this partnership as a big success so far, and we have pledged this partnership for the next 10 years. So it's basically every year €1 billion plus being spent on these matters.
Yeah, no, I think two points stand out from I think the way you've described the partnership. One, I think, is the cheaper finance piece, right? And there's just issued its own green sovereign bonds. In fact, I've just written a piece on this climate finance piece that's come out today with Carnegie, where those green bonds are not necessarily that much cheaper for India. And when you mention, the cheaper finance that you're being able to offer through KfW, etc., and I think the rates are in the range of 2.5%, 3.5%, which, for example, India's sovereign green bonds are still at, if I'm not wrong, at 7%, right? Just a few basis points and what you would get otherwise commercially. And I think that's a very important piece from the Indian standpoint, because unless we can get cheaper finance, a lot of our transition on the climate side will be slower than what we want and also the world wants. The other piece, I think, is what you started off with, which is the private sector piece. And I hope that the business delegation that came with your chancellor this time around had a lot of these clean energy companies as part of it, because I do think that it's not just a crisis that we're dealing with here. on the global level and at the national and city state level, but an opportunity. It's a massive economic opportunity for companies to uh, be early leaders in this climate transition that I think all countries are at different stages at. But to the extent that the Indian and German private sector can cooperate on this and capitalize on this opportunity, and I believe it's a once in an era opportunity. Much like the Industrial Revolution, this energy transition or climate transition that we're going through is really a once in a lifetime or once in an era opportunity that I hope that Germany can offer its expertise and India can offer its expertise, talent, to combine that and create value.
No doubt, no doubt, and I think you are completely right when you say it's an opportunity, and that's how we see it in Germany. It has been creating a lot of jobs in Germany, and this whole transition, the whole transition away from fossils towards renewables is something which has to be thought through thoroughly, but it's also offering huge opportunities for many people. Yeah. And I just want to mention here that Mercedes has started to build the first e-vehicle. The first German car producer in India now comes out with an e-vehicle. E-vehicles are very, the taxes on e-vehicles in India are very low, so it's a good opportunity. Even if you want to buy an expensive car, the e-vehicle, the Mercedes e-vehicle with this low tax is good, and I find that also a very clear signal, towards India that we will have more e-vehicles in months to come. Others will follow. Other car producers will follow. I see a lot of potential in the e-vehicle market also.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think mobility and renewable energy have been two big focus areas, I think, even for India in the last few years as part of its own climate transition strategy.
Can I say, one of the big changes I've seen in Delhi after coming back after 12 years is metro. The Delhi metro. I'm one of the very few ambassadors, I think, that who takes the metro regularly. But it is a state-of-the-art metro that transports 4 million people every day, which is an amazing amount of money of people. And it does in a very reliable way and quick and fantastic. So it's better than Berlin Metro, I have to admit. And when the Minister of Foreign Affairs, when she came, he made it a point for her to take the metro to Old Delhi. So we went with her on the metro. She was very impressed.
Best way to get to Old Delhi, I know, is the metro. But no, I can second that. I think having lived in various cities around the world, the New York subway, for example, when you compare it to the Delhi metro, of course, that's many, over 100, 150 years old now in New York. But yeah, I think the Delhi metro is one of those examples of where India has actually managed to really put in some state-of-the-art infrastructure in public transit. And I hope that can be replicated, right, across. Let us now maybe move to the defense and strategic side of the India-Germany partnership. That was part of the focus, obviously, of your Chancellor's visit also. I think India has had a very strong security partnership with many other countries. I think the India-Germany one on the defense side is maybe not as, again, similar to maybe the economic piece, not where it could be. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about where you see the defense and security partnership between India and Germany as it is today, and where you'd like to see it, let's say, 3 to 5 years from now.
So I think we have to start by saying there is a defense and strategic partnership with India. There is an old and well-established and fruitful contact between the armies. There is a very regular flow of German military products into India. But, and this is, I think, what I hear in your question also, it is certainly not as developed as it is with other European countries. Our French friends and neighbors have a different partnership with India. Now, I think then let me explain start by explaining, and therefore you have to look a bit what happens in Germany proper. So our current coalition is the three-party coalition, and there are when it comes to export of weapons and armament, there are in one party, particularly in the Green Party, there are question marks, and that leads to the fact that Germany, unlike other European countries, is restricted when it comes to arms export everywhere. It's not in India, it's it's in a specific issue for every country outside NATO, let's say, outside NATO. I think, I say that with all due caution, this is beginning to change. And geopolitics have to do with it. I think what you've seen, the Chancellor was here, the Foreign Minister was here, other ministers will come. There is a shift towards India, which is very much noticed here because Germany is not alone. Everybody looks at India in a very in a more attentive way than before, and therefore I think I foresee in the near future, more engagement. Now, one engagement is already there. This is Indo-Pacific, and I think the Indians have noticed very clearly that the German army has expanded its activities in the Indo-Pacific. There was this Brigade Bayern last year who did a big tour. So the Indo-Pacific was in Bombay also. And next year there will be a new frigate, and together with the French, as it seems, we will do something in the Indo-Pacific. We have planes in the region. We had this Pitch Black, was it? The Australian maneuver where German planes took part. So the Indo-Pacific has come to our attention in a much bigger way than it used to be. So I think you can consider the Germans now in the Indo-Pacific, of course, in their limited possibilities, but it's an area where we, with our Indo-Pacific guidelines, where we'll have more activities in the years to come.
That's right. And of course, the Indo-Pacific, there's been a lot of talk over the last several years now that countries like Germany and France could and maybe should get more active in the Indo-Pacific. But one complicating factor in that, and that has maybe sometimes even taken resources or focus away from that, is obviously something closer to your border, which is the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about your view on where we see that going. It's been now over a year. There doesn't seem to be a very clear outcome in sight. What are your views on that? Do we see any possibility there for a negotiated outcome in the Russia-Ukraine war? Are there other things that we are not maybe thinking about as a world as ways to resolve that conflict? What are your views on that?
So, Anurit, I think everybody wants a negotiated solution somehow. We want this war to end, and we see that a negotiated solution would be the best way to end it, ideal outcome. But frankly, it is very difficult to see how that is going to be happening soon. Now, I listened very carefully to what Lavrov said in this Resina dialogue, where the moderator very friendly, and I think overly friendly, frankly, I would have asked some very different questions. But he said, when is the hour of diplomacy coming back? And Lavrov would not commit to that. He said, the Ukrainians are the ones who don't want, and he could have said, we are ready to negotiate, but he didn't say that. He didn't say that. He was clearly saying that this is not the time, basically. That's what I heard in the undercurrent. So I fear that in the months to come, I don't see a negotiated solution coming up, because a negotiated solution must be, acceptable to both sides in a way. Yeah. And, frankly, Ukraine has been attacked, has been invaded. They have annexed Ukrainian territory, and it's very difficult to see how this situation, as it stands right now, is satisfactory to the Ukrainian government. I must say my comprehension is complete. I think I feel what the Ukrainian side really is demanding, namely the complete withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine, is entirely my personal view. I think what we see is a small country is attacked by a big country under some pretext to get some, to expand their territory, and this is can't be acceptable in our times anymore. So I feel that the Ukrainians are fighting courageously. They are really, to everybody's surprise, they are holding on, but at the same time, I don't see the Russian side, because they don't want to lose face, withdrawing somehow. So I think this war will be with us for a while.
It'll be a long, protracted one. What's the NATO view on this? Is there
So NATO is a defense alliance. Let me make that very clear, because in India sometimes you hear very rare and strange things about NATO. NATO is a defense alliance that is not meant to attack other countries. So basically, let's get the facts right. The facts are that the Russians attacked Ukraine and invaded Ukraine, not NATO. So NATO clearly has said, we will support Ukraine in this, because it is a greater good that is at stake here. That's the international order. And international order means safety of borders. And India, of all countries, knows what safety of borders means. Your own country is exposed to border conflicts in many ways. So I think we have all, right, and also there is to fight for this, for sustaining the international order as it was developed over the decades of the last century. Now, Europe certainly was always a big era, a big piece of land where war had all the time. There was over the centuries you see war after war after war. But since 45, Europe has managed for a long period to stay without war, whereas other parts of the world were very much involved with wars. But after the trauma of the Second World War, Europe has stopped being the epicenter of war, I would say. And that led to, in Germany, in my country, led to a thinking, maybe in hindsight, a little naive thinking that war is over in Europe. And that military self-defense is not as necessary as we would consider it now. And therefore, I think in Germany, this war has led to a complete reassessment of this whole security structure, our own, NATO, but also the fact that war in Europe is possible is something that people had to get used to. And therefore, you see what we call the Zeitenwende, and then the turning point, where we invest heavily in our military again. We will have Sweden and Finland being part of NATO, and we will support Ukraine with all the necessary means.
Yeah, and you've obviously mentioned the post-World War II era, and that's a important benchmark for us to look back at and see whether we are now again at that turning point where, if a Cold War between the Soviet Union and the US shaped that post-World War II era, today the geopolitical competition between the US and China threatens to turn into another Cold War-esque situation. Do you feel that we are on the throes of another sort of split world, which obviously was not the case, since the 90s? Or is the fear of a Cold War not justified, or a Cold War-esque situation not justified?
I think history doesn't repeat itself. Normally, history is not. You will not see time again things happen that happened before. So I think the Cold War scenario is over in many ways. And let me say that even during the Cold War, our relation with the Soviet Union was better than our relation with Russia is today. This is very important. So, but what I see with China is this huge challenge for each and every one of us to, try to see the danger and see the opportunities also. So, China is a competitor. It is a rival. It is a very, very how can I say, it's a country where you have to ask a lot of questions when it comes to regional behavior. At the same time, as I said before, it is a very important part of the international economy. And you can't, cut that from one day to the other. We have seen that our dependence on Russian oil and gas, put us in, albeit for a short time, put us in quite a lot of dire straits anyway. With China, it would be 100 times more. So there, I think the interesting or the most important thing is to be and keep being involved with China without losing, our sight when it comes to the parts of China's politics that.
And do you think the world can pull that off? That kind of balance in that relationship, where you continue the relationship as was the case earlier, maybe slightly reduced, but still remain cautious? Is that possible? And even from the Chinese standpoint, do you think that's possible?
I think what we see in China now is that they are very, very keen on keeping the Europeans and keeping the distance to the Americans. So what you see is they try to involve the Europeans in a way, but keeping the Americans at arm's length, and that will not work. That will not work. Yeah. This is so you have to see the West and
as a united house, and so you feel like they will act in a very coordinated manner, and the Chinese will not be able to choose one or the other.
You see that the West has been very united on the Ukraine portfolio, and I think that shows that if need be, the West is really very, very close, and this idea of divide and rule is not going to work. It works maybe with the one or other country, smaller country in Europe, Hungary or others, but in the large way, it doesn't work.
Yeah. No, I think we are in for a time where diplomacy, I think, will become even more important and more complex.
You don't get unemployed.
I think the moment you have cases where negotiated outcomes are so hard, it's very important actually for diplomacy, at least behind the scenes, to continue. Because otherwise, if you have clear breaks in communication, whether it's in the case of the Russia-Ukraine or the West versus China, I think you're in for a much more dangerous geopolitical environment.
So you see, that the chancellor, my chancellor, is talking to Putin in a sort of regular way. He had a long discussion with Prime Minister Modi on that also. I think the feeling is that there is not much of a movement on the Russian side, but at least there is a channel. And that's important.
That's right. The one piece that we'll talk about before we conclude here, Master Ackermann, is the people-to-people piece between India and Germany. I've spent a lot of time in the US. I've seen how important the people-to-people relations are. And in my experience, the US-India relationship would not be where it is if it wasn't for the number of Indians and Indian Americans in the US on one side, and the amount of exposure that people from both countries have to each other. On the Germany-India front, I know that there are lots of students. I have several friends, even from my school, who've studied medicine there. I have studied with a lot of German students during my time at Harvard and even at Wharton. Where do you see that people-to-people relationship going, and how can we expedite maybe those people-to-people and cultural relationships between these two nations?
So I think there I'm completely confident that we'll see many, many more people-to-people contacts over the coming years. So the Indian diaspora in Germany is 200-something thousand. It's not the biggest diaspora, but what we can say already is the most successful diaspora in Germany is the Indian diaspora. So as you mentioned before, we have 35,000 Indian students in Germany. And I have 21,000 new applications for the next 2 semesters. 21,000. So it is an enormous. We are overwhelmed by this number, and we basically can hardly cope with it because it's so many. But that shows that there is a clear dedication when it comes to Indian students for master programs to go to Germany, as they are taught in English, as the state universities are very good and they are for free. So many people go. So I think the Indian diaspora will grow through students, but also through skilled labor migration, and we will see that big time in the months and years to come. There is an urgent need for migration in Germany. They think we need about, in the next 15 to 20 years, we would need 6 million people to migrate to Germany in order to keep the economic performance we have. Germany is still growing, although our demography is not growing. We have a birth rate that is below 2.1. But we are growing through migration, and that is the clear intent.
What's been the main barrier you feel for greater migration of skilled or other labor?
I think what we see is there is quite a successful program when it comes to high-skilled labor migration, so IT experts or something. If you get a contract in Germany and some salary, some amount of annual salary, you get a visa in 2 weeks. That's no problem. But now what we need is also lower income migration. The chancellor was meeting 4 people who were about to leave South India for Germany. 1 engineer, 1 nurse, and 2 masons. 2 masons. They were learning German. Their German was quite okay. I was quite impressed with them. And they will go to some place in northwestern Germany where I feel hopefully they enjoy it a bit. Coming from Karnataka, I'm not so sure. But but they are looking forward to a very, very good job and a good salary. So I think we need to lower the threshold for these people because we need caretakers, we need nurses, and we need also craftspeople. We have now from Kerala, I think, 10 apprentices for butcher coming to Germany, and everybody making big fuss of it. 10 people, it's not enough. We need more of that. So this will be one of the main areas of our bilateral cooperation will be the skilled labor migration. And I think we'll see a lot of people coming. Now, let me get back to the students because that's important. Once you have a degree in Germany, you finish your study in Germany, you have 12 months to find a job. So you can stay on for 12 months to find a job. I can assure you that everybody from India will find almost everybody will find a job in very little time. So I've talked to some Indians who go to the universities of applied science in some place. They have found a job in a month, and they are very happy in Germany. So I think what we'll see is what the demographic experts would call circular migration. They study in Germany, they do a degree in Germany, they stay for a couple of years in Germany, they earn good money, they go back to India with their expertise, earn good money in India also, and that is there is a link between Germany and India that is very strong. So the best example is Sindhu, the president of SAP Labs in Bangalore. She's a fabulous woman, and she she lived in Germany for 15 years with SAP. Then she came back to India, and
that's right. And I hope this
is the way how it should work.
That's right. That's right. No, I completely agree, and I hope that some of these Indian students and Indian skilled folks who are migrating to Germany also become entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But I think if you again look at the US as an example, the fact that many of the Indian students in the US eventually turn entrepreneur and then create what is really an example of entrepreneurship, innovation, and wealth creation, that really inspires a lot more students then also to go there.
I have no doubt that will be the case.
Yeah.
In the Indians, I have no doubt that.
That's right. Well, Master, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for talking to us about everything from economics to energy to wildlife to your own personal travels to books and obviously to the more strategic affairs that we must talk about when we are sitting in Delhi. But I hope that you have a great time ahead also in Delhi, and actually more importantly, more outside of Delhi than just inside Delhi, as we discussed, and you get to visit more wildlife reserves and work on biodiversity, which is, I think, a piece close to your heart and mine, and spend time in the mountains and other parts of India. Thank you so much for being here with us, and we hope to continue working with you at Carnegie India and hopefully building on the German-India partnership.
Thanks, Henri. It was a great pleasure to talk to you, and I will tell you that I have no doubt that my time will be great here. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. To make sure you don't miss it, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. To learn more about our research and team, you can visit us at carnegieindia.org. You can also find us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.